It's a great pleasure to be here. I'm based in the factory in Brno, and a little shameless plug here for Brno, but I'm not sure who's aware, but actually 35% of the world's EM microscopes come from Brno. So it's really a great hotbed really for EM research. Of course, there's us plus a couple of other vendors. Some of them are here who are also based there, but also a very nice community there. If you're ever in Brno, please feel free to stop by. So open invitation. I'm here to talk a little bit about the thinning methods that are used in vEM. This is going to be quite high level, and I apologize in advance if any of you subject matter experts out there would disagree with my statements, but the purpose of this talk is really to give you a view of where we are with the different sectioning methods that are available to you, and just to sort of give you some ideas about what you can do with the data. So I wanted to start off with this, and I guess I'll focus really on these techniques that we'll have. So there's a few different things here. So a lot of you are familiar with serial block face with in-chamber microtome. Of course, that's also now possible with gallium or with plasma or even with lasers. I'll go into that a bit as well. We can serially section with those beams. But you can also do ray tomography, you've seen in previous talks. I'm sure you'll see more. But also cryo-tomography as well is at the other end, if you like, of the volume EM spectrum. So really we're covering everything now from molecular to tissues. I think one of the points for us is we're really seeing trends in sort of multi-scale workflows coming now. So people aren't just interested in getting SPA results. They want to be able to paste that back into the tissue volume and understand what the mechanisms are. And so I think what we're aiming to do, certainly at Thermo Fisher, is sort of span that space and really try and integrate the different workflows. So that's what we're doing. Okay, let the contention begin. So this is my sort of historical view, if you like, of where we came. I started in the 90s, so that's where my clock started, so I apologize in advance. But I started there with classical EM, mainly for pathology applications. It was really a 2D world back then, and then what you've seen is during the 2000s, we've started to explore a little bit the 3D space. We saw the introduction of serial sectioning, but also with things like gallium FIB, and of course, developing through 2010 onwards, we really sort of saw the consolidation of that as automated pipelines for milling and collection. But also we saw things like of course, the serial block face innovations and some of the array tomography innovations coming out. But really in the 2020s, we're sort of taking that in two sort of directions. We're adding other techniques which aren't based on knives, really expanding the space. But also there's a huge amount of work obviously done by you guys really in how we actually process the data. That until recently was really limiting, but now we're really seeing some sort of innovation there. That's really helping to make use of what you can get. More recently, there's things like broad ion techniques which are coming in, which are of interest as well. So we'll go a little bit to that. So what I'm going to concentrate on really is the stuff in green. And we do accept data from upstream. You can correlate data across. Until recently, as I mentioned, there's things like XRM, for example, which was great for sort of upscale imaging. And you'll see today, obviously, with things like the work from Sirius, you can see actually we're getting to see also that you can leverage X-ray with the cryo world as well. So that's really quite exciting. I think for me, there are several ways to section for these. Down at the bottom, you see, sorry, I'll get back a bit, but you can see two movies running on the bottom. Hopefully it's running. You can see two optical movies running, hopefully at the bottom there. They are really showing, PowerPoint's doing something funny. They're really showing that you can do optical sectioning. I'm not really going to go into that, but whether it's with light anyway, you can even with resin blocks, the sample on the left there is actually cells which are buried below some resin, and of course they're fluorescing, and of course you can use that for endpointing, the same thing that you can do with cryo work, which is on the right. For micro-CT, again, we've often used that in the past for localizing regions of resin blocks in the bulk to be able to excise it. And I think that's one of the things that we're working on, be able to take those coordinates and mill those out. When you look at the traditional EM work, I just want to sort of give some idea about the comparative pixels, if you like, that you get from the technique. And so again, this is very tongue-in-cheek. So there's a lot of examples one way or another. But really, when you're doing ultramicrotomy, you're taking relatively thick sections. But for the right scientific question, that's fine. Maybe you want to take a few large area overviews and then be able to localize some subregions quickly. Sometimes you need really an isotropic, tiny, teeny voxels, then you might go to the right and use something like vEM or serial block face, where you can go down to more isotropic nanometer volumes. It's really, you have to choose the right method for your use case. We start off with sectioning, and again, just a few examples here of things that you can think about. But for room temperature, of course, we're still affected a little bit by the artifacts of sectioning. It's great with the innovations that we have now with microtomes and resin systems and other things that get rid of a lot of those artifacts. But ultimately, they are still quite hard to deal with in cryo conditions. So you still see that quite a lot. So while microtomy, I think, is perfect for room temperature, and it obviously allows it to be very accessible, for cryo, it still has some applications. We're seeing a lot of growth in cryo conditions with vEM because it avoids some of the artifacts that you get there. So if you haven't seen it, these are the classic pictures, if you like, from CEMOVIS, where you can sort of see the chatter and compression that you get with cryosectioning. This is one of the reasons why vEM is so attractive. With bench microtomy, of course, it gives you two techniques. This is array tomography here, or you might prepare serial TEM the same way. So here you'll be taking serial sections, floating them onto a bath. Of course, then you can pick them up on a wafer, or you can pick them up on a TEM grid. I really love this technique because it's extremely versatile. I mean, you won't be doing millimeters typically of tissue, but you're going to be looking at 10, 20, 30, 100 slices, and that can give you enough volume to actually get a meaningful study in a day. On the right side there, you see we have like a tape collection version, so you can do it on wafers directly, or you can have it on tape, or you can have it in many different ways. It allows you to bring back reconstruct the volume and see that. On the lower left, you can see a little bit of a zoom. This is a whole cross section of a worm here. But of course, this is one of the nice parts of this technique, is you can quickly survey over the slices, find where your region of interest is, and then of course you can zoom in there and start doing some high resolution images at those sites. You don't have to chew through a whole volume to find it. So it gives you a great way to screen it. One of the really nice things about this technique, of course, is it's non-destructive, which can be very beneficial. There's also in-chamber microtomy. If I play the first movie at the top left there, for example, this is our volume scope system, but you can see it sort of being mounted. It's a pretty small microtome, fits to the stage, and then you mount your specimen. The middle video shows a little bit the block face, if you like, with the diamond knife passing over the top, just taking a section. Of course, this is what is automated in the CEM, collecting the samples. What you get out of that is something like this, where you have a series of images here, and of course then you can render those and reconstruct it and volumize it. So that's what you're seeing there. This is very nice. I mean, it gets rid of you having to do this sitting by a microtome externally. You can trim the block to improve the performance of this, and then you can leave the system running. And we have some people running the system for, I think the record was 8 weeks. We've had sort of running constantly with a job to acquire data from a whole millimeter of material. So this is very nice if you can afford 8 weeks of full time to do a job. But as I say, it's for the right question, it's a very nice technique. On the lower image here, this is just another example of another type of sectioning. So this is using optical sectioning with electrons. So here we use accelerating voltage, actually lower the accelerating voltage over in steps, and that gives you some information from different places within a single slice. In this case, this is a single slice from a volume scope, and then we do a voltage series, but you can see it's actually easy to deconvolve a little bit of 3D information within that. So that allows you to go from a slice thickness of, say, 40 or 50 nanometers, but then you can do the optical sectioning at, say, 10 nanometers between, and use it to infill a little bit the volume. The next thing I wanted to talk about was vEM. So we also have now pVEM. P is the plasma. When we talk about vEM, we're typically talking about gallium. And then, of course, with plasma, you can have a range of different ions for milling. So typically, we'd use things like argon or xenon on our systems. We can use oxygen and nitrogen also. But there are many solutions out there. The pFib just means that you're sputtering things more aggressively, typically, and also with different plasmas, you can also have some chemical reactions with the beam itself to give you some enhanced etching properties. So it's basically going a little bit faster. Most of the applications for pFib-SEM are at the, should we say, the bulk milling steps. If you're doing fine milling, we still tend to be milling with similar currents to gallium, but you're able to open up much larger areas or do much larger studies with plasma. On the top left is a movie we just saw playing, which was representing sort of classical slicer view. So there you would take a sequential mill and then image a surface, mill, image a surface. And you do it with this cut-based geometry. That gives rise to things like this cryo data set here. So if I just show this one here, this is actually done in cryo conditions with no staining, but this is done using classical slice and view, but in a traditional lamellar geometry. On the right side is a new technique, which we call spin mill, but is essentially, you see the movie, we're taking a big block, that we're milling from the side, rotating, milling from the side, so on and so forth. And that's building up a volume, or is opening up a cut face, which then allows us to image and then build up a volume. These days, it's not so dependent on the angle, so you can really have full flexibility of the angle of the imaging and the milling, and then it gives you the option to do different techniques. So there's quite a lot of things there. In the lower movie I'm just playing, this is just a typical brain sample here, but this is a selected area on one of the spin mill zones collected over a 24-hour period, but you can see that you can really capture a lot of detail there. On the right, you can see a retinal sample. Just to give you an idea about the cut face that we're opening up, we're spin milling there across the whole surface, so it's roughly equivalent to what you would get from a microtome-based technique these days. So you can also do cryo-ET, and I say that that's not the focus of a lot of people here, but you can also mill cryogenic specimens. I'm showing here a movie which is doing a single cell on a TEM grid, but I think you will see some presentations during this sessions from people working on tissues and other things. So now this is being opened much more to a bigger field. What I'd like to show is a little bit the ET contrast that you can get, and so I'll just play some tomograms here. This is what we get from unstained tissue, if you like, or in this case cellular tissue. That gives you some idea about the contrast that we can get from without staining in a full cryogenic preservation. So I guess just at the end, I wanted to say what ones to watch. One of the things that we're interested in is the application of lasers. So at the top left there, you can see we have a laser fib. I'm going to play a movie here, which is a slice and view volume cut with lasers. The milling time here is fractions of a second, so it's really very brief exposure with a femtosecond laser, and then you image, and then same again, rinse, repeat. You can build up a volume there with that. The cut face quality is obviously a little bit less than you would expect with ions or even with a knife, but of course it allows you to go through very large volumes very quickly. So this is obviously interesting for people wanting to do whole millimeters or 2 millimeter studies at say 100 nanometer resolution. Something like that would be appropriate. We also have, I say, people exploring gas cluster and broad ion methods, and I think you'll probably hear about those on this meeting. But in the middle row, you can see this is a gas cluster ion gun that we have on our XPS instrument. And actually, these are used for biology increasingly now in the exploratory scope. So actually, XPS is interesting for elemental analysis. You can get quite a lot. These gas cluster guns are very good at removing atomic layers of materials, so really less than a nanometer evenly over a large surface quite quickly. And so this is obviously quite interesting to the community as a way of also looking at milling. The lower image, by the way, is an image from a SIMS microscope. So this is using the same cluster gun, but this time sucking the material down a mass spectrometer. I get asked this question all the time, so I thought I'd put it in. Right now, those type of integrations are really good for elemental studies down to about 10 parts per million. But for chemical analysis, it's still a long way off. So it's very much at the beginning, but obviously there's a lot of interest in that. On the right side, I'm just showing a benchtop, a broad iron polisher, and it's a very Star Trek or Close Encounters-like image underneath there. But essentially what you're seeing there is a very broad plasma beam that's being directed against a surface, but it's protected with a cut-off aperture. So you have a mask that prevents any milling below a surface. Of course, this is obviously interesting as a way of maybe doing very fast cross-sections of large materials for people who are exploring this broad iron technology as well. So again, fun things. And so I think with that one, I'm right at time, so I just wanted to summarize, but essentially what we have here is two examples. You've got here classical resin embedding, and we also have a cryo volume. And essentially, we're tending to use things like free sub and cryo for the higher resolution work when you want to do studies. Classically, ImPrep is a fantastic place to get started. There's a lot you can do with it, even with the benchtop systems. It's fantastic what you can do now. We have obviously plasma lasers, broad ion milling. This is where the technology is going, certainly from us as a company. But really, we're seeing the main challenges with things like data storage, reconstruction, and processing. So for us, that's the big bottleneck that we're still seeing. So I'm really encouraged by everybody's work that I've seen presented at other meetings this summer, which are making it a lot easier to visualize. Okay, so with that, any questions?
Thank you very much. Any question, Paul?
With the new laser technology, what's the depth you can achieve? More like, what's the minimum? How thin can you go?
If it's cross-section preparation, you can mill with the edge of the beam. You can go pretty thin, but it's how the step size, if you like, is on nanometers. If you're trying to make like an intermediate cut, then it starts to get a bit more challenging because the cut width is very broad. So if you're doing like a cross-section slice of view, around about 100 nanometers is typical for, so say 513 upwards. And that gives you undulations. But if you're trying to make a trench or a cut, then you might be looking at something more like 5 or 6 micrometers for a clean cut. But then you're going to have some thermal damage around the cut site, so you would have to polish it out or remove it out. So it depends on your application. You're thinking about trimming blocks without microtomes. Yeah. Yeah, so that's what I was showing from that data set. Yes, exactly. You can do that, but it's around about 100 nanometers or so would be the resolution. You can go up if you want to. I think if you're just trying to do minimum slice thickness, it would be 100. But if you're trying to do, say, a micron, 10 micron steps, yeah, absolutely, you can mill that away in a few seconds.
Hey, Jim. Thank you very much. So you talk about the laser and all the future with the plasma and everything, but yet the ECM imaging is taking a long time. Have you got any approach or something that is going to come to help us to speed this part of the process?
Well, obviously you have one board, so that's I hope you're going to be presenting.
It's too slow.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly something that we have seen. There's not been a lot of innovation in detectors. That's something that we're working on. I think with the demands for speed, we rely a lot on the stains, and now people are going to minimal stains or no stains. We can get good contrast even from resin samples these days with no stain. It does put a lot of challenges on the detection. So actually, this is something that we're working on. I think at the moment, though, I think we have detectors which work at the speed at which the resin permits. But I think actually moving forward, I think that's definitely something that we want to improve. Yeah. Yeah.
Any other question? Thank you.
Hey, John. I'm wondering, is there any development going about spin mill in cryo?
If you want it, you can do it, pal. No, there's no reason why spin mill won't work with the with cryo samples. You need to have combicentric rotation for our spin mill method, but provided you have a flat sample that allows combicentric rotation, that's fine. I.e., no pre-tilted shuttle. You want to have it mounted flat. Sorry, that's the easiest way.
We still have time for one questions.